Hi, my name is Aya. You're watching Aya Reads, and I'm here to rank every single new release I read ever since the last video I did that ranked my new releases. So I'll leave that first video linked for you. So if you watch both videos, then you'll have seen me talk about every single new release that was published this year that I read. So basically in this video, I'm going to talk about my least favorite book, working my way up to my favorite. But I do have to say, there are still 3 books that I'm planning on reading this week that I am not talking about yet, but I will intersperse clips when I do finish them, because right now I do have my makeup on, I am ready to film, and I'm thinking those 3 other books, one I'm halfway through, and the other 2 are just novellas, so I'll probably finish them at night, and I have to work this week anyway, so you'll see clips of that. So I cannot really give you the ranking while I'm talking about each and every book, but you'll see, I think down there, maybe, the actual number, because overall I will be talking about 19 books and novellas. It makes sense when I go through them. Let's get started. I think all of them are romances, and a lot of them I have read for the Goodreads Choice Awards too, so I'll leave that video linked for you. So my least favorite new release that I'm talking about in this video, but honestly, this is my least favorite new release of the whole year, is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This book, you follow Eli and Rue. The book starts off with them meeting up to have a hookup through this hookup dating app, but they get interrupted, and then they meet each other the next day when Rue finds out that Eli is part of a company that has taken over her company, and she works for this biotech firm, and she's a biotech engineer. They're still very much attracted to each other, so eventually they start up this co-workers with benefit situation. I had 2 major problems with this book. The first problem was that this was too imbalanced for me. I felt like he was so obsessed with her, yet she didn't care about him at all. Like, she cared even less than, I don't know, like a random person on the street. Like, he would ask for basic normal things and she would refuse to give it to him, yet he would give her the shirt off his back even when she didn't ask for it. So this was just too imbalanced. I did not understand him loving her. And this was supposed to be like an erotic romance. It definitely did not work as that. And this felt like a recycled plot because I had already read it in another book by Ali. So I would not recommend it. It was 2 stars. Probably should have been 1. The fact that I don't really have anything good to say about it. But I read it in a vlog where I read this one and God of War, where I go in depth about my thoughts. So I probably have some good things to say about it then, because I still like Ali's writing style. Like, I read her books pretty easily, but this was just not it. Another book I gave 2 stars was also very disappointing. It was The Courting of Bristol Keats. So I also vlogged my experience reading it, so I'll leave that linked for you. This is a romantasy following Bristol, who thinks that she's a normal human living in the human world, and she recently lost both her parents. And then she and her sister start getting mysterious letters from a mysterious aunt that they've never heard of before. So when she meets up with this aunt, she finds out that her parents are actually fae from this fae realm, and they want her help. And then on the same day, she finds out that her father might not be dead. So she agrees to go with these people to their fae realm as long as they will help her find her father. And the person granting her that wish is Tegan, who is a king in one of these realms. And this is their romance. I had 3 major issues with this book. The first one being that I felt like there was really not a lot of character development in this. Also, not a lot of relationship development. And I'm not just talking about the romantic relationship. I'm mainly actually talking about the friendships built, because I read and loved The Remnant Chronicles. One of the things I loved most in that series was the relationship between the main characters and the side characters. And this, I felt like there were too many side characters, so there was no real way to build solid friendships. At the end of the day, I had major problems with the writing choices made. Not the writing style, but the choices. I felt, so this is going to be a duology. To me, this felt like she wrote an entire story and the story got split halfway through, and the first part is this book and the second part will be book 2, because this did not have a solid or satisfying beginning, middle, and end. This felt like it had somewhat of a decent beginning and half of a middle. And I felt like my problems with the character development plus relationship development would have been solved had this been a trilogy, because she needed to spend way more time on those things. And I felt like, especially the ending, I'm still flabbergasted by the ending. I felt like that ending would have been perfect halfway through book 2, because this did not have an ending. So 2 stars, unfortunately. The Rom-Commers by Katherine Center. This one I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and you follow Emma and Charlie. And Emma has been taking care of her sick dad for about a decade, but she always had aspirations to become this screenwriter. And then one day her ex-boyfriend has a job for her, and he wants her to rewrite this famous screenwriter's rom-com screenplay. And that famous screenwriter is Charlie. And when they get there, Charlie is completely surprised because he didn't know that his agent hired somebody to rewrite his screenplay that he thought was perfectly fine. So eventually they do convince him that she should stay. And of course, for romance reasons, in order to work for the screenplay, they have to stay at his house, both of them. And it's gonna be their romance. I thought Charlie was a giant douchebag. I did not understand why she fell so hard for him. Like, aside from maybe being starstruck, but that does not a romance make. So I just didn't care about this romance, because I wasn't rooting for it, because I thought she deserved better. That was until towards the end, she became so bitchy to her sister that I was like, you know what? You two deserve each other. Go be happy being miserable together. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't care at that point. Like I said, I liked her up until a certain point, and then those scenes happened, and I thought, like, I was flabbergasted that her sister forgave her, honestly. So this was not for me. This was my first Katherine Center, and I have heard good things about her other books, and probably she will be nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards again, so this will probably not be my last Katherine Center. This summer will be different. I gave 2.5 stars. So with the other books, you have seen those in like my worst books of the year and my most disappointing books of the year and stuff like that. This one, however, is not. And the main reason is because I keep picking her books up because of the Goodreads Choice Awards, but I never would have read her books. Like, I know if I wasn't reading them for Goodreads Choice Awards, I would just not pick them up. And in that case, it's unfair to keep highlighting her books in these worst books of the year, because it's my own fault for picking them, because they are just not for me. This book, you follow Lucy and Felix. Felix is Lucy's best friend's little brother. Every year, Lucy goes to Prince Edward Island, where her best friend is from, and her best friend made her promise like 3 things, and one of them being, don't fall in love with my brother. But on the first day, that first year, she meets this handsome guy, and they have a one-night stand, and then they realize who each other are. And every year she visits, she kind of hooks up with him, and she keeps that secret from her friend. And now her friend, who's supposed to be getting married, flees a week before her wedding to Prince Edward Island, and Lucy goes after her. And of course, she and Felix have to figure out their relationship, I guess. Like I said, Carley Fortune is just not for me. I feel like she spends way too much on the physical aspects of the relationship, yet her scenes are almost always either fade to black or closed door. And then why, like, to me, you cannot have both. Like, either if you're gonna just focus on the physical aspect, then it just needs to be open door, because otherwise there's a disconnect. So if it's gonna be closed door, then it has to be more than just sex. I feel like both with this one and the other one I read, Meet Me at the Lake, these characters were just constantly so horny for each other, and I didn't understand why, because I was never invited to that aspect of their lives. And I also feel like, alongside that, I feel like I never understand why these characters are in love with each other, aside from the fact that they think the other one is hot. She constantly just focuses on physical aspects. She constantly just focuses on the looks of the other person and never really about personality or anything other than looks, like something of actual substance. So then in that case, I don't know, I feel like because of those 2 things, I never connect to the characters, nor do I connect to the romance. I was listening to this like halfway through, and I did enjoy that experience. So I do think, obviously next year, her book is also going to be nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I think I'm just going to listen to it, rather than actually reading it. But like I said, I knew that I was probably not gonna like this. But since I'm reading it for a certain project and not out of my own volition, it feels unfair to also, I could have chosen not to pick it up. It was my own choice to pick it up, even though I knew I probably was not gonna like it. So 2.5 stars, and this is just not for me. I would still recommend picking it up, especially if you have liked her other books. I think it could work for you. I do know Meet Me at the Lake was not a lot of people's favorite book, but I know Every Summer After was. Daydream by Hannah Grace. This I also read for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and this was also very disappointing for me. The plan was actually to read it when it came out, and I was in a reading slump then, so I didn't pick it up. Okay, so this kind of highlighted the problems I have with her books. Yet I gave the first book 4.5 stars, and I gave the second book 5 stars. It was one of my favorite books I read last year. But with both of them, I had some issues. The problem was I was not, especially with the second book, there was little problems I had with the book, but since it was the first book I read in that series, I thought the problems I had with it was because I hadn't read the first book yet. Yet this book, since I already read the first two, it's clear that it's her writing style and not because of me and not reading the first books in the series. And what I'm mainly talking about is the amount of side characters. There's just too many of them, and most of them are not really that well developed, so I get them confused constantly. And like I said, in the second book, that was fine, since it was the first book I read, and I just assumed, oh, I don't know them that much because they have already been introduced in the first book and I just hadn't read it, whereas that's just not the case. So this book, I know I went on a tangent here, you follow Henry and Hallie, and Henry has been a side character in the first two books, so we have known him for a while now. And Hallie's boyfriend recently broke up with her because he was a douchebag too, but he was like, okay, you don't even want to sleep with me, because they never had sex. They used to be best friends, and eventually, like, since they were childhood friends, they eventually became more, but she didn't have her own friends. Basically, all the friends she had were his friends, and once they broke up, all those friends ditched her too. And she's also like sort of like a manager for her family, where they rely on her for a lot of things, even though she also has her own life. Yet she's not able to live it that much because she's very busy with her family and her school. So she has this romance book club, and Henry goes there with Aurora, the main character from the first book, and they get talking, and then they become friends, and then they become more. Like I said, one of the big things in this book that I just didn't like was the amount of side characters. I just feel like she needs to cut those down a lot. And I just didn't feel like these two had any chemistry. I didn't feel like they had any spark. I felt like there was no angst in this book. They were fine. I liked them, but I never really fell head over heels in love with them, because it was just, there was nothing propelling me forward to read this 420-page book. Like, it was too long for something that didn't need to be that long. And also, this might be nitpicky and you might disagree, but I feel like since I have a master's in psychology, I feel like I can speak on it a little bit, even though I'm not neurodivergent myself. I just find it so unrealistic that Henry, who is a male main character, it has been proven that women tend to mask their neurodivergence way more than men do. I know Hannah based him off of herself, but I feel like she should have probably based Hallie on herself and not Henry, because I find it so unrealistic that his neurodivergence was never spotted by anybody in his life, and especially not his mom's, who at least one of them is a actual doctor. Like, I just cannot, like, the way his symptoms present, it's very clear that there is, like, that he has some sort of neurodivergence. It's not something that he's masking at all. And a lot of it has to do with school, which you would think, especially when he was a little bit younger, his moms would have figured out, okay, he tends to struggle a little bit with some, like, subjects he is not interested in. And I'm a doctor, and I probably have to diagnose people with neurodivergence. Maybe my son has some sort of neurodivergence. And it's not just school, it's also when there's like a lot of noise and a lot of things going on at the same time. I just cannot believe his mom, who loves him and is a doctor and he's her only child, has never ever had him diagnosed in a way. Like, to me, it's unbelievable. She could have still kept him, like, if she wanted him to be the neurodivergent one who was not diagnosed, then she should have given him different parents, or maybe more siblings, or something else that would be an actual reason why he went 20 years being undiagnosed, even though it does have an impact on his life, you know what I mean? And he's not masking at all. So I know that was a tangent, and maybe it's something particular to me, I don't know, but that bothered. But like as far as the romance is concerned, I didn't give it 2.5 stars just because I thought he should have been diagnosed or whatever. The main reason this was a 2.5 is because I just didn't believe in this romance and I just didn't care about that romance. The Love of My Afterlife by Kirsty Greenwood, I gave 3 stars. The main reason this was 3 stars is because it was marketed as a romance. It was a nominee in the Goodreads Choice romance category, yet this is not a romance to me. It just isn't, even though I did like the book. You follow Delphi, who in the first chapter, she chokes on a burger and dies. And then she gets sent to this afterlife where she meets her afterlife therapist who tells her, you know, this is going to be your like afterlife. And then she meets somebody and her afterlife therapist tells her that is your soulmate. And so they have this thing, her and this guy. And then her therapist makes a deal with her saying, I'm going to send you back to the world of the living and you're going to have 10 days to find your soulmate and get him to kiss you. And once you accomplish that, you can stay. If you do not, however, you have to go back. Like you're going to die again and you're going to stay dead this time. And the only thing she knows about her soulmate is where he lives, which is in London. And she does too. And she knows his first name and the first letter of his last name. So when she gets back, she has to find him. And also like she is kind of living her life in these 10 days because the last almost decade of her life, she has really not been living. The only thing she was doing was working and just sitting at home watching her TV shows. And anytime somebody wanted to get close to her, she just kept them at a distance. And the only one she did have some sort of decent interaction with was her neighbor. In the last 2 years, she was kind of taking care of him. Also in this book, her neighbor wants her to fake date him so that his parents stop setting him up with this particular woman. And eventually it's going to be the romance between her and the neighbor. The only problem I had with this book is I only found that out at page like 250 or something. Like there was only 150 pages of the book left once I realized, oh wait, this is not a romance between her and Jonah, the soulmate. This is a romance between her and the neighbor. So like I said, to me, this was not a romance. Like, this was really Delphi's story and Delphi making friends, finally living for the first time in her life, her coming to terms with her past and how it has set her back. And it was not really a romance because I don't really know Cooper, the neighbor. I don't know him at all. Like he felt like a side character in his own romance. And yes, it was like, I liked it. I liked Delphi. I liked her journey of figuring out herself. And I did end up enjoying the romance in the end, but I just couldn't give it any higher than a 3 stars if it's marketed as a romance, you know what I mean? Swift and Saddled by Lyla Sage. This I also read for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and this was the only book I read so far in this series. I did not read Done and Dusted. This book you follow Ada and Weston. They have this like hot encounter at a bar where they share a kiss, and she's in Rebel Blue Ranch. She's an interior designer, and she is hired to like decorate this new like bed and breakfast type thing. So when she gets to her job, she finds out that Weston is not this mysterious stranger. He's actually the guy that hired her to work on his project. And of course now they cannot really be romantic because he's technically her boss. But of course, eventually it's going to be that romance. This to me felt kind of boring. Like it was fine, but it was nothing special in my opinion. Honestly, and I didn't want to say it in the Goodreads Choice vlog, but this to me felt like a little bit of a watered down version of the Chestnut Spring series. And maybe that is because of this particular romance. I don't know if I'm going to feel differently once I read Done and Dusted or the third book. I felt like I knew Weston very well because I knew him, I knew his family. Yet I didn't really know Ada that well. Like I didn't really know her through and through. I didn't know why she did the things she did because this is a pretty short book and we never really delved into that. Yet I feel like in a romance, like the first and third book, where these characters have known each other for such a long time, that is going to be a little bit more balanced because the characters will know each other a lot. But like this was not bad. Like I did enjoy it. I flew through it. It's not that long. And it passed the time, but ever since I read this book, which was not that long ago, I read it in November, I really haven't thought about this book at all, so that should really say enough. Another book that I gave 3 stars was The Wedding Witch by Aaron Sterling. This is the third and final book in the Graves Glen series, the first book being The Ex-Hex. And this book you follow Bowen, who in the first 2 books you've seen him be a recluse with a giant beard, and you follow Tamsin, who has kind of been causing problems in the first 2 books. This series follows these 3 witches who are brothers finding their Ichie, and she is a human, but she basically procures magical objects and sells them to the highest bidder, and he hires her to exclusively work for him. And they have been slowly getting to know each other throughout this year, and they've been falling in love in this year. And then during Christmas, they both go to this magical estate. She goes there because there's a job that she's hired for. Well, technically, so she goes on this website, she finds somebody that is willing to pay $1 million for her to find this magical object. And even though she promised Bowen that she would not take any other job, she does because it's so much money. And he gets invited to go there. So they meet each other again, and then something happens which transports them to 1957, and they have to work together to get back to the present. So this is technically my least favorite book in the series, although, to be fair, actually only The Ex-Hex is the book I really loved. And it got proven once again in The Wedding Witch, because when Reese especially, but also Vivi were mentioned, I was just over the moon and so happy. Whereas when Gwyn and Wells get mentioned, I just really don't care that much. So I would say if you're going to read this series, just read the first book, because I think, in my opinion, since it's one of my favorite books of all time, I would highly recommend it. But I really don't think it's for everybody, because it doesn't have the highest ratings. So not a lot of people love it, but I really love it. So the problem I had with The Wedding Witch was, like, the way I described Swift and Saddled, I really like being in the business of my character. So I like show, not tell. So I just don't believe you when you say you love the other one. I have to see you actually fall in love. And with The Wedding Witch, the problem I had was, yes, it was understandable that you fell in love with each other in a year. Obviously, that is a normal amount of time to fall in love with someone. The only problem was that whole year was described to the reader in like 5 pages, maybe 10, but not any more than that. And then the rest of the book is them already in love, trying to convey that to the other person, and also trying to get back to the present. So I just really didn't believe in this romance. Like, I just didn't understand why they loved each other, because I never was a witness to them falling in love, because that all happened off page. So that just doesn't work for me. And like I said, the only things I really loved about this book is seeing Reese be a father. That just melted my heart. Reese is one of my favorite characters, one of my book boyfriends, and I just love him. And I loved seeing him in this book. And as much as I'm glad I finished off this series, the only book I'll be rereading over and over and over again is going to be The Ex-Hex. Moving on to the 4-star reads. Okay, so it's a week later from when I filmed the rest of this video. And if you think I live in this sweater, you're right. It's my favorite sweater, but I did wash it in between. I'm here to talk about, honestly, the last book I read, and technically I've not finished this yet, but I still need to read about 40 pages, and my Kindle tells me it's gonna take me 50 minutes, and I really wanna just upload this video because it's already going up a little bit later than usual on Sundays. So I am confident with my rating because I'm gonna give it 4 stars. If anything changes, or if I have any other thoughts that I really wanna share, check the description box for my thoughts on this book. So I'm talking about Sweet Surrender, which you already know since it's been up the whole time. This is the second book in the Sweet Demon series, the first book being Sweet Vengeance. And Sweet Vengeance was pretty popular last year. A lot of people that I follow really love that book. And this one is not that popular. Let me actually see. Yeah, it only has 184 ratings. And to be honest, I haven't really heard anybody else talk about it, so I really wanted to include it in this video. Sweet Surrender by Viano Onyomo is another demon romance, and another one where a human makes a deal with a demon, and this time it's an MM romance, so you follow Saint and Knight. And this also takes place in Nigeria, and I felt like this book, we saw a little bit more of Nigeria than we did in the first book. From what I remember of the first novella, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't until she mentioned Nigeria that I realized, oh wait, we're not in the US or the UK or wherever else. Whereas here, it's clear that it's definitely set in Nigeria. So Saint has basically been stalked for years because he was in a cult, a very religious cult. And since he fled from that, people have been following him around and like stalking him, and he has been moving around because of that. And now he doesn't want to run anymore because he met this demon in his dreams where they had this like sexy time together doing like primal play and consensual non-consent. And then in the dream, the demon, whose name is Night, showed him how to summon him. And when he's found again in a place that really feels like home to him, he summons Night to protect him, basically. And this is their romance. And it's a novella, it's an MM romance, like I said. And since this takes place in Nigeria, and apparently being queer is illegal in Nigeria, the fact that he's queer poses a real threat, and their relationship poses a real threat. So it's not just about his relationship with Night, it's also about him navigating being queer in Nigeria. So there are already some scenes where I'm sorry, if my voice sounds off, I'm getting sick. So my throat hurts, my body hurts, like I'm so tired. I just want somebody to cook dinner for me. That's all I want. So maybe I'll order something. Anyway, moving on, that's neither here nor there. It's him also navigating being queer in Nigeria and making friends. I'm giving this book 4 stars because... So I don't know if it's because of this book or because it's the end of the year and I'm so tired. So the sun apparently, today it has been shining, but it hasn't really shone in the last 10 days. And I'm really feeling the effects of that. I'm very, very tired. And like I said, I'm also getting sick. So it might have something to do with that. But even though this is less than 200 pages, it's for sure a novella. I'm on my 7th day reading it. So that is way too long. It's very easy for me to put this book down. I do have to say, while reading it, I am enjoying it. Like, I'm liking Saint and Night together. I'm really liking seeing queer people in Nigeria. Part of me wishes this was a little bit longer because I would assume, I haven't finished it yet. Obviously, I still need to read 40 pages, but I know I'm probably gonna want more of his relationship with Teresa, who's another queer character in this book. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. The sex scenes they've had were already so fucking hot. I know Viano does them very well because I did read Sweet Vengeance. If you want a book that is like very focused on revenge, this is not it. Like, this is definitely different from Sweet Vengeance. Obviously, it's called Sweet Surrender, and the title does indicate that it's definitely not about vengeance. It's like Saint just wants to be safe. He wants to live his life. He wants to be left alone. And that's the reason why he summoned Night. Whereas Joy wanted revenge, basically. And I feel like that the difference between them is that Joy, I feel like she has more agency over her life. Whereas Saint really, if it wasn't for Night showing him the summoning spell, he would not know that Night was real or that he could get protection. I feel like things just happen accidentally for him. Like, if Night hadn't just stumbled upon his dreams, then Saint would have probably fled his place by now. But having said that, it doesn't affect my enjoyment. Like I said, I am enjoying it. And it's 4 stars. And I would highly recommend that. Like, I don't understand why this doesn't have more ratings. I would say if you read and loved Sweet Vengeance, pick up Sweet Surrender. And if you haven't, you can read Sweet Surrender without having read Sweet Vengeance. But I would recommend them both. If you want definitely a diverse book, then this would be perfect. Let me see when this one came out. It has been a while, so that's why I am... Yeah, so it came out in May. I do have to say, it wasn't that... I think I just stumbled upon this book. I don't know. I feel like it wasn't that clear that Sweet Vengeance already had a sequel, which probably is the reason why a lot of people haven't picked it up yet. But I would highly recommend it. 4 stars. If you're not in a reading slump or not sick like me, then you'll probably fly through it because the writing is very easy. And so, yeah, do I have any other thoughts? No, I think that's it. I'm gonna edit this video now and finish this book. The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore by Laurie Gilmore, I gave 4 stars. This is the second book in the Dream Harbor series, I think. And once again, I read this for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And once again, I've not read the first book yet. So this was the first book I read, and you can go into it without having read the first book. So this series, you follow this small town called Dream Harbor, and each of their members probably getting their HEA. In this book, you follow Hazel and Noah. And Hazel has been living in Dream Harbor her entire life, and she works at a bookstore, but she doesn't really have a life. Like, she just reads, and she works, and she doesn't really, like I said, she does have friends, but she doesn't really have a life. And Noah visits her bookshop every week, and he buys a book based on her recommendation. Hazel's friends think that he has a crush on her, and she doesn't think so because she thinks he's hot and she thinks that she's not. So then she actually finds while she is working a book that is marked up, but it seems like this book is hinting her to do something. And that keeps happening. It seems like somebody is leaving clues in her books for things to do. So she asks Noah to do those things with her, and he is more than happy to oblige because he has been crushing on her for a long time. And yes, the only reason he's been buying a book from her is because he wants to be close to her, but it does have an added benefit that he actually loves the books that she picks out for him, so he actually becomes a reader because of her. And while they're doing their adventures, they end up falling in love. So they do have like some sort of a problem in that he's technically an out-of-towner, even though he has been living in Dream Harbor for a while. She doesn't really believe that he'll stay, I guess. Once again, I did enjoy this book. While I'm talking about it, I do realize that I have forgotten a little bit of this book. So it doesn't have that much, like it doesn't have really a lasting power for me. But I did enjoy this town. It reminded me very much of Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls, obviously. I like their town meetings, and I like the quirky characters in this town. That is one of the things I love about a small town romance. But I would recommend it, obviously. I will be continuing on. I want to go back and read the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and I want to read the Christmas romance that recently got published. The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This is a marriage of convenience fake dating romance, which I do think they do fake dating romances very well, because obviously The Unhoneymooners was very popular by them. So you follow Anna and Liam, and they've already had their marriage of convenience. They got married 5 years ago because both of them wanted to live at this place during college, but they only rented to families, so they actually got married to be able to live there. And Anna has been thinking that they've been divorced like for 3 years, but then one day Liam shows up at her door telling her that they have in fact not gotten a divorce, and he needs her to come with him to his sister's wedding because he's from this very, very rich family. And he's been telling his mom that he's been married, and he's been showing pictures showing her who he's married to. And his grandfather said in his will that in order to get his inheritance, he had to be married, but not only married, he had to stay married for 5 years. He's willing to pay Anna to come with him to the wedding and pretend to be his wife for 5 years. So she does. And he's from this, like I said, rich family, very like unlikable. Like his father is a giant dick, and his mom just goes along with it. His siblings, some of them are fine. The other ones, I'm like, whatever. And this actually is a little bit open door, which has been rare for Christina Lauren's recent books. So I did enjoy it. I liked their romance. I thought they were hot together. And I liked the different personalities. Like, it's like, it says here, so the only problem, Anna is feisty, foul-mouthed, messy, and the complete opposite of what the Weston family had anticipated for their son. And I just liked her being plopped into the setting of these rich, oblivious people. One thing that was kind of, I don't know, I felt like Anna had no agency over her life. Like, at some points, to an unrealistic degree. Like, to me, I just didn't understand. Like, so they were married. So they were roommates for at least 2 years that she didn't actually know his first name. It's like, that is kind of unbelievable to me. Like, how do you not know that? And how do you not know that you're not divorced? Like, how are you this oblivious? Like, what if you'd met somebody in these last 3 years and wanted to get married to him, and then once you're getting ready to marry, you find out that you have been, like, you're still married? Like, how do you not? Like, I just refuse to believe somebody knows that little. Like, it's just unrealistic to me. But other than that, it was definitely enjoyable. I would recommend it. And it's a fun summer read, and as long as you don't take it too seriously, I'm sure you're gonna enjoy it. The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. This, once again, read for the Goodreads Choice Awards video. So you follow Kit and Theo, and they used to be best friends, and then eventually they became more than that. And then 4 years ago, they broke up while on their way to this European food and wine tour, and now they meet each other again because they both decided to go on the same food and wine tour without the other one knowing, of course, because they never got a refund. They did get like a voucher that is expiring this month. Basically, they have to confront all those old feelings, those old wounds, and this is going to be their second chance romance. So while they're on this food and wine tour, they make this deal, or they do this competition of who can sleep with the most people in the most cities, I guess. And the food and wine tour goes through France, Spain, and Italy. And these are the places they visit. I don't know if you can see that. And what's interesting is this book is being told, was told in an interesting way. The first half is told completely from Theo's point of view, and the second half is told completely from Kit's point of view. Theo is non-binary. I enjoyed this book. First of all, a second chance romance I tend to love because like it's the exact opposite of what I described that I don't love. Like I want to see people actually being in love and know each other through and through, and obviously somebody or people who get a second chance in love, obviously they have known each other, like they know each other very well. And I really loved, like I live in Europe, and I did feel like she did a good job describing the places and the food they were eating and the beverages they were drinking, because Theo is a sommelier and Kit is a pastry chef. And like I said, I did like them together. But some things were bothering me, and I do feel like there were a lot of like European stereotypes of the people they were interacting with. Like the side characters didn't feel real to me, and I do feel like the side characters were basically not humans. They were just like sex dolls for them to fuck. Honestly, like sorry to have to say it that crudely, but that is just what it felt like. I just found it so unrealistic that everybody these two came in contact with wanted to sleep with them. Like that is just not that realistic to me. But yeah, like I said, I did enjoy it. Play Along by Liz Tomforde, I gave 4.5 stars. So this is the third book in her Windy City series, and you follow Kennedy and Isaiah. And in the third book, Caught Up, you find out that they got accidentally married in Vegas. And in the third book, you also have seen Isaiah crushing hardcore on Kennedy. Isaiah is a baseball player, and Kennedy is like the athletic trainer, I guess. Yeah, athletic trainer. And of course, Kennedy wants to annul right away, but the manager of the baseball team finds out because there are pictures taken of their wedding, and he wants to fire her. And Isaiah, apparently in the past, a married couple was working together on the team. Like the man in that relationship was a baseball player and the woman was a photographer. So he uses that to convince the manager to not fire Kennedy, because there was a precedent set of married people actually working together. So the manager agrees, and now they have to pretend to actually be in love and married. But there is a job offer, or there's a job she wants to apply to in California, because she has been working as an athletic trainer when really she has studied to become an actual athletic doctor. But when on her first day, her boss, who's a total sexist pig, rescinds the offer because she was actually hired as a athletic doctor. But once he realizes that she's a woman, he rescinds the offer. So she's been working as an athletic trainer, even though she's 100% overqualified for the job. And the only person who knows is Isaiah, and he's been keeping that secret for 3 years. Once he realizes that she wants to move to California in 6 months, he now has a deadline. He has 6 months to make her fall in love with him. And he's very swoony. Like he is perfect, almost too perfect in my opinion. That's why I gave it 4.5 stars. Sometimes he said and did things where I'm like, I like my characters to have some flaws, and I felt like she did that perfectly in The Right Move and Caught Up, and not so much in Play Along. Isaiah is struggling with anxiety because his mom died while she was driving in a storm, and now every time there is a storm, he has to check up on all his loved ones to make sure they're not driving. So that was heartbreaking. And Kennedy is from this rich family who kind of forced her to get engaged to this guy. And we find out in the last book that that engagement was broken off, and now her stepsister is marrying that same guy. So that's also something she's struggling with, that she doesn't really have a great family. That is also another thing that bothered me, is on the one hand, that rich family played a part in her life, and it seemed like they were funding her life, yet there was never any stakes with that. Like usually with those books, a family like that would play a little bit more of a problem, and that wasn't the case in this book. And then in that case, why have them be a part at all, or they never should have played a big part in her life. You know what I mean? I just felt like this book, there was not really that good of a balance. Like either her family is a problem in her life or they're not. And this just didn't really add up in my opinion, but still 4.5 stars. I love her writing style. The reason I gave it 4.5 stars is I realized that I was grinning from ear to ear when Kai, Maxie, and Miller were making their cameos. I was like smiling more than when the actual couple was the focus. So in that case, it just became clear to me. I gave Caught Up 5 stars. Watching them in this book made me giggle and kick my feet. more than the actual couple. So in that case, this can't be 5 stars. But like I said, I flew through it, and I still love her writing style, obviously. Another 4.5 stars is How to End a Love Story by Yulin and Kuang. I do have to say with this book, this felt very personal to me why I loved it. I don't know if I would recommend it across the board because it did get some mixed reviews. You follow Helen and Grant, and they used to be in high school together, but what really binds them is that her sister committed suicide by jumping in front of his car. And now she's a famous young adult author and he's a screenwriter. He gets hired as one of the people making the screenplay because her books are getting turned into a TV show. And when she realized that, she wants him to quit and he doesn't want to. And while they're working on this TV show, they do develop a romance, but obviously it needs to be kept secret and it's only temporary because her family will never approve of him for her. She is Chinese American and she does struggle with most especially her relationship with her mom. And I guess the two things that really made me relate to this book is I did relate to her because I'm also from an immigrant family, not Chinese obviously, but especially her relationship with her mom was also pretty complicated when I lived with my parents. I do have to say that is really not the case now as an adult, whereas for Helen it's still the case. But I did find myself relating to that part very much. And I also related to this relationship, I guess. So it was very clear from the beginning this relationship had an expiration date. Something similar was happening in my life a couple months ago, and I like some scenes and some lines were almost verbatim what happened to me. So that part I kind of related to very much. Like in that case, I was the Grant in that relationship. The reason this was 4.5 stars is I feel like she should have groveled more. I feel like in a similar book where the roles are switched, where the man is the one that pushed the relationship away, 100% would he grovel. And if he did not grovel, there would be riot. So I feel like in that case, when it's the woman running away from the relationship and like wanting to come back, she should at least grovel a little bit, and she did not do that. But I did enjoy this book. Obviously, I gave it 4.5 stars, and I would recommend it. But like I said, it's not a guarantee you're actually gonna love it. Then my last 4.5 stars is God of War by Rina Kent. This is the 6th, and at the time of reading it was the final book in the Legacy of Gods. Although I do have to say, so there's another book coming out and it is marketed as a Legacy of Gods spin-off. So I don't know when that will take place in the timeline, but this book you follow the long-awaited Eli and Ava book. And this book I actually read in the same vlog I read Not in Love In, so check that out if you want more of my in-depth thoughts. You have seen them in the first 5 books where they had this interesting dynamic. And in this book, so you start off with Ava having this car accident, and when she wakes up, she finds Eli at her bedside and she tells him like, you know, what are you doing here? And he tells her that they've been married for 2 years, but she doesn't remember the last 2 years at all. And you follow them trying to navigate that, her trying to navigate her relationship when she doesn't really trust him at all, and him trying to take care of her because she does have some major mental health things going on. I really enjoyed this book, but it was heartbreaking. It was painful at times. And at some points, because of the way her mental health, like the type of mental health problem she had, I sometimes kind of struggled with the consent in this book. And that is really not that different from the other books, yet I felt like, yes, those other books in the series also had non-consensual scenes, but the main character, I at least trusted that she could give and take away her consent. Whereas with Ava, at points I wasn't really trusting her to do that because I didn't believe that at points she could give consent or take that away. But Eli was heartbreaking. Like, Eli definitely had a part of my heart because I felt so sorry for him. Like, he loved her so much, yet it was some of the things she was doing, sometimes not intentional, just was breaking his heart, and she didn't really have any idea what was going on. I did wish this book had more flashbacks because I was interested to learn a little bit more of their dynamics while they were growing up. And I did feel like at one point I was like, dude, you need some help because you cannot really do this on your own. It's gonna literally kill you. But obviously it's Rina Kent. I love her writing style. I really love this book. It's not my favorite in the series, but I did feel like it was a solid ending. Leather and Lark by Brynne Weaver, I gave 5 stars. This one I also read for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And this is the second book in the Runa's Love trilogy, the first book being Butcher and Blackbird. And I was kind of disappointed with Butcher and Blackbird. That was not my favorite book. So I was hesitant and my expectations were very low when getting into this one. So I was pleasantly surprised. I do know that a lot of people who loved Butcher and Blackbird were kind of disappointed in Leather and Lark. So for me, it was the other way around because I was so disappointed with Butcher and Blackbird. This one I loved a little bit more. So you follow Lachlan and Lark, and Lachlan is Rowan's brother from the first book, and Lark is Sloane's best friend from the first book. And they meet each other. So she is also a serial killer, but she goes after men who take liberties with people who do not want them to take such liberties. And then Lachlan gets called in when she needs help kind of disposing of such men. And when that happens, they get into an argument and he does something very shady. And the consequence of that is, so he works for a contract killing business. And because of that, that business loses her family as a client. And then her family gets killed one by one. And they understandably think it's Lachlan doing that. But she knows that it's not him. And her aunt tells her, if you want to save him, she doesn't technically want to save him, but she knows that if he dies, that's going to hurt her best friend and her husband. So she agrees to marry him and he reluctantly agrees as well. So this is a forced marriage and I really loved it. Like, I thought that Lachlan was so sexy. And I do have to say, maybe part of it is because I listened to this on audiobook while reading it, because the audiobook was top tier in my opinion. I thought the accent for Lachlan was so hot, and since Lark is a singer, her narrator would sing some parts, and I just enjoyed that very much. To me, why I felt like this book worked more over the other one is I felt like that book focused more on the rom-com side, and I had issues with that because maybe it's the psychologist in me, but I just want to know, like, I want to know why people do the things they do. I felt like that was clearer in this book. I felt like this book focused more on the dark aspects and less so on the rom-com, and I just preferred that. And also, I do have to say, this is probably the case of right book, right time, because obviously I was reading it for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and those books are all similar in a way, and I was craving like a little bit of a grittier, smuttier, darker book, and this delivered on that. So maybe that's why I got 5 stars, but I still, like, I think about this book to this day. I just really enjoyed it. I loved when he called her my wife. Like, yes, please say that to me in that accent over and over and over again. And I just like the sex these two had. So very good. So I know I said I was filming the entire video of this and then putting clips in when I was more disheveled. I got dressed up for my work Christmas party. So that's why I look like that. But it's right now almost 8 o'clock, so I need to get going. So I only have time for one, and I'm gonna tell you my thoughts on Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. So this book actually came out in September, I believe, but I was in my reading slump then, so I never picked it up. But I did want to read it before the end of the year, so here I am. This is the second book in the Rose Hill series, and this book you follow Weston, who's Rosie's brother from the first book, and you follow Skylar Stone, who is this very, like, world famous country music star. So think in the lines of Taylor Swift, although obviously Taylor Swift doesn't do country anymore, but like she is just as famous as Taylor Swift. And in the first book, we read that Cora, Ford's daughter, wanted to record an album with Skylar. So she's now here in Rose Hill to record that album. Also because she's running away from her family, who have been using her and taking advantage of her entire life. And actually, before she gets to Ford's place, she runs into Weston, who is saving her from potentially being eaten by a grizzly bear. So she's obviously from the big city and she finds this bear and she's like taking pictures with it. And then Weston is like, get out of there. And eventually he actually saves her. So they don't really get off on the right foot because he's kind of being rude about it because he thinks that she's so stupid for doing that. So Ford's recording studio was supposed to have these like little cottages where people that are recording could also stay, but they're not finished yet. So they tell Skylar that she can stay at like in the bunkhouse that Rosie stayed at in the first book. So that bunkhouse obviously belongs to Weston. So she agrees. And obviously it's very different from what she's used to. She stays there with Weston, and Weston has 2 children, and so he's a single dad, Emmy and Oliver. While she's in Rose Hill, she's slowly healing from basically everything that happened in the past, what her parents did to her. Seeing Weston be such a good dad really shines a light on the fact that her dad is the exact opposite of that. She slowly falls in love with Weston and his children. Not so slowly, honestly. Like I said, she's this big artist, but she never has written any of her music. So she also is trying her hand at writing her music. I heard that the audiobook, they actually sing the song, but I didn't really want to buy a whole audiobook just for these 2 songs. So let me know actually if I can find them anywhere. But I gave this book 5 stars. I really loved it. I think I prefer it over Wild Love, honestly. So for those of you who don't know, I sometimes have issues with famous people, especially if they're not athletes. And I think what I take issue with mostly is like the whole Hollywood life. So I liked in this book that she was taken away from that into a small town. And yes, she was, like, there's still paparazzi. Obviously, she's still getting noticed, but it's not that in your face. I thought Weston was so hot. Like, he was such a sexy guy. So he used to obviously be this wild child, I guess, who would get into fights all the time. But ever since he became a dad, he tempered that a little bit. I loved the way he was with his kids. I loved how he really approached them differently. And some of the scenes in here just melted my heart. And obviously I loved every interaction he had with Skylar, like, and in the bedroom, he was like chef's kiss amazing. One thing that was kind of annoying was his nickname for her. So he called her Fancy Face, and he did that one too many times. I was like, okay, call her something else, please. This is annoying. I don't know why. I don't really like that nickname, but I mean, if that's my worst criticism, then this book did amazingly. And I really enjoyed Skylar. I liked the way she bonded with each of his kids. She really realized what she finds important in life, and what she has been told was important really isn't. What else? Yeah, obviously I really like this small town romance. I honestly, I don't know what else to say. I really loved it. I would highly recommend it. The 3rd book was already set up in this book, and I cannot wait to read that one. No, Elsie Silver just continues to be one of my favorite authors. I think the lowest rating I ever gave her was a 4-star, which is still amazing. And this is 5 stars, obviously, and I would highly recommend it. My favorite for now, I do have to say, the book I'm reading right now might overtake this one, but it's The Striker by Ana Huang. This one I read as soon as it was in my hands, and I was lucky enough to receive it like 2 weeks before it actually came out. So obviously I vlogged the experience. So you follow Asher, Donovan, and Scarlett. And Asher you've heard about in pretty much all of Anna's series. He's a notorious football player, very hot, but he constantly gets into trouble. And Sloane from King of Sloth is actually his publicist. He has an arch nemesis in another football player called Vincent. And he actually transferred to Vincent's team halfway through the last season. And because of their rivalry, they lost a big game. And their coach sends them to get ballet lessons to improve their game, but also to learn to work together. And when he gets there, he immediately gets a crush on the ballet teacher. But it turns out the ballet teacher is Vincent's sister. So definitely off limits. But of course, they end up falling in love. And I really enjoyed it. I thought Asher was the most considerate hero of them all. So Scarlett used to be this prima ballerina, but because of a car accident, she cannot really practice ballet anymore. And also because of that car accident, she gets chronic pain. And I just like how considerate he is. Like, even during sex, he just maneuvers her in ways so that she's the most comfortable. And I just love that. And he's just so romantic. And I really like, so I read her books because I like her writing style, obviously, but most of the books she writes are not really my genre because I don't really love billionaire romance. But I loved in this book that, yes, he was rich, but they also did like normal things together, and I like that. I like that balance. Like, it's fine, I guess, if there's a very rich guy or rich hero, but I just don't want all the extravagance and constantly throwing money at people. And I felt like, for example, that happened a lot in Twisted Lies, but also King of Sloth in a way. So I felt like in this book there was a nice balance, and Asher is just very hot, and I really love sports romances in general, and I felt like Anna did a good job with the striker. So these were all the new releases I read in 2024. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you've read any of them and what your thoughts were. If I convinced you to either pick up a book or not pick up a book, let me know in the comments below. If you're down there, leave me a football or soccer emoji for Asher. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know by leaving a like if you did. I thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.